Hello, this is Scott from War Eagle River, and we have a new release car here, the Policar330P, and we're going to show you how to set this up to race on our track at a very competitive level. Here's our car out of the box. Finish is nice. Everything looks secure. There is a little piece of red tape over top of the Ferrari badging, so you can just get underneath that and pop that right off. And we'll take the one off the other side, and those are off. There's also one underneath the rondelle on the front, but we won't worry about that. That's underneath the tampo. So let's get her broke down. Inside of the car, it's pretty much a standard slotted setup. Let's go ahead and get it broke down. There is M2 set screws in the front on the guide wires. We'll remove those. We'll be reusing those. And the wires have been tinned, which is very good. We'll put the lead wires through. And let's go ahead and pull out the pod. And the pod screws are also fully threaded. We'll also be changing those out. Okay, the pod is out, and these are plastic wheels, so real gentle we can pull those off, slide out the axle, and we'll be reusing these inserts, so we can just pop those out, put those aside. Okay, if you notice, there are M2 set screws into our pod, into the motor. Very bad idea if somebody tightens those down too much. Those are going to end up in the motor, and your motor is done. Now get under your motor and lift it out gently. A lot of people try to press it out, and what happens is it'll cause a stress fracture right here in their pod, and then your pod is warped. So I'll just get under the motor, just pick it up a little bit to release it from the carrier, and then I can press it out without any stress. Looks like the gear is a standard 11-tooth pinion with the standard slotted setup 32-tooth spur gear. So we're going to change out the pinion gear. So we get a little more top end, we're going to go to a 12-tooth. So we'll take our puller, pull that 11-tooth off, and we're going to replace it with a 12-tooth. And we'll press that on. Now if you notice, most slotted motors come with a double shaft. This one has already been trimmed. Okay, so we'll press that on, and I took note of about how far I need to have that off of the casing, so my gear mesh will match up fine when I replace it back in the pod. And we'll replace that back in the pod. Okay, I left my spur gear screwed on just as a reference point, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a .005 axle spacer and put it up against the gear. And we'll put that back in the pod. And on this side, I'm also going to use a .005 axle spacer, and I'm going to cap that with a .05 axle spacer, and then I'm going to sandwich that with another .005 axle spacer. Now, the reason I like to sandwich that is there's such a sharp edge on these spacers. So sandwiching it between the other two spacers gives you a little bit of room to work with without cutting into the gear, into your pod, or into your wheels. So now I'll take a CB Design 15 by 10 wheel, and I don't want my axle protruding through the end of the hub. I'm just going to snug that on there just a little bit so I can move it if I have to, and I want just a hair of play in between the pod and my .005 washers. Just a little tiny bit. I have good gear lash, nice and smooth. Put the other wheel on. And I still have real nice action there. Now where I pulled that M2 screw out, I'm just going to go ahead and put in one motor screw to secure that. That'll keep the motor from flopping around. Some people will use two, and some people prefer the tape method. Now I'm not going to go all the way in. I'm just going to go until I feel it, and I want to make sure that I still have nice play there, and then I can snug it down. So there, we're good to go with that. Now if you did notice, I have trimmed the ears off the sides. This allows me to get a little bit more float in my chassis without it getting hung up anywhere. Let's go ahead and remove the front axle assembly. And we'll be using the inserts out of the front wheels. We'll be using a .005 washer, then a .05 spacer. Same idea on the front as we did on the back on the one side, and we'll sandwich it. And put on our 15 by 8 again, trying to keep it flush with the inside. and we'll just snug that down. We'll do the same on the other side. 0.005 washer, 0.05 spacer, 0.005 washer, and our hub. And we're just going to snug that. We don't want to tighten these down too much. We want to get just a hair of play in this front end. Just a little bit. Now we can snug those down. Don't over tighten these M2 set screws. You strip them out and have one heck of a problem. Now we're free spinning. Very nice. Go ahead and pull the front guide while we're here. They just pop out. I press on the top, pull on the bottom, they come right out. Now we can go ahead and put our pod back in the chassis. What I'll be using is a slotted screw, brass, and if you notice it has a smooth shoulder on it, and that's going to allow me to get float with the chassis. These are the slotted CH54 screws. Just get those started. A couple of threads so you can make sure that you're going in nice and straight. Okay, we have all 4 pod screws in, and as you can see, we have a real nice float all the way around. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and tighten these down, and I just go till it starts snugging up, and I'll go back about a half a turn. Do that with all 4. You don't want to over tighten these, you'll strip out the pod lug. So I just go till it starts to snug, go back a half a turn. We'll have to make adjustments on these depending on how the car is going to drive. So we still have real nice float all the way around. Now we can go ahead and put on our guide. What I'll be using is the Slotting Plus SP101001. It's a universal standard guide. And I'll also be using a 0.01 guide spacer. Now noticing, putting it in the gooseneck, that it's a little tight. It's a little too tight for my liking. So what I'll do is I'll take a small rat tail file, and I can feel that there's a sharp edge in there. I can feel it. So I'm just going to go ahead and knock that out just a little bit. Real lightly. And then we'll try that guide. Now it's nice and free. It was just a sharp edge from the mold. Very nice. Now I'll have to trim this post off of this guide. So what I'll do is I'll just mark it with a straight edge on the screwdriver. And I'll go trim that off so it's flush with the top of the gooseneck. Okay, here's our guide. It's trimmed and it's flush with the gooseneck. So we'll go ahead and put on our guide spacer. And while we're here, we'll just go ahead and take just a small drop of sewing machine oil, and we'll go ahead and put that guide in, and it's nice and free. Now we'll take our guide screw, and I like to grab it with the needle nose, and this helps me to get it started. And we'll secure that guide. Now I'll go until I just feel it's starting to snug up again. I want to make sure that I have enough action here, and I don't want any wobble in it. So I have just a hair, so I can go ahead and tighten that down just a little bit. And there, that took out the wobble. Maybe just a little bit more because it's got a little bit of back and forth. That's perfect. Nice and free. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and attach the braid. And I like to pre-cut my braid in about 3/4 of an inch pieces. Comes on a roll, but I find it easier to just go ahead and cut them all up. And I put them all in a little storage container, easy to get a hold of. I'll go ahead and insert the braid. I like to run it to just short of the back of the guide. So that's perfect. And then I'll fold it over. And I'll put my lead wire back underneath the axle carriers. Into the guide. And we'll go ahead and replace with the M2 screws. And we'll do the same on the other side. Now at this point, what I like to do is I want to go check for how this gear is lining up and meshing up on my power strip over here. And I'll let the motor actually run for about 3 minutes on about 6 volts. And that'll let the gears kind of mesh up and break in, and also give the motor just a little bit of time to warm up. So let's go ahead and do that right now. We'll go ahead and give it just a dab of sewing machine oil on the inside and the outside. And we'll let that run for about 3 minutes. Now that the motor and the gears have had time to kind of set themselves and everything feels good, it's nice and smooth. We still have a real nice play in the back here, just a little bit in our front. We're going to go ahead and put on our tires. First tires we'll put on are the fronts, and these are NSR zero grip tires, 201 non-friction rubber tires. And I'll just kind of snap the edges, get some seated on real nice. and we'll inspect the tires, make sure there's no cupping, and they look nice and flat. They look pretty good. And we'll put on the rear tires, and the rear tires that we'll be using are Quick Slicks, and these are CB42F. And I'll do the same thing, just kind of snap the edges. You don't have to do it too hard. You don't want to dislodge the tire. And they look nice and true. One good thing about Quick Slicks is they make them to fit each individual rim, and they did one heck of a job. Snap the edges. And one thing we're going to look for is we want to make sure that we have clearance between our tire and our motor shaft and our tire and our gear, and we do. It's perfect. Now we'll make sure that we're laying flat all the way around with our rear tires, and they look nice. And with our fronts, we just want our fronts to barely touch. And when I put it on the track, all four tires should just about be touching and rolling. That's perfect. Might have to do a little tiny bit of adjustment on this side here. Lower it just a hair. So what we'll do is we'll go to our bottom set screw, and we'll just twist it just a tiny little bit. Make sure we're not too tight. We're still freewheeling, and then we'll go down with this one to match that on the bottom one. Just a tiny bit. We're still free spinning. Let's see what we look like. Perfect. One thing we want to make sure is we go ahead and get our wires in the pegs, and also we want to make sure that our braid is not touching on our guide screw, or it'll short it out. And another good thing to look at is twist your guide all the way around. Make sure it's not pulling too tight on your wire, and it's not going to hit on your front tires. Okay, one thing I'm going to look for here before I run it around the track is I want to see if all four wheels are laying nice, and check my clearance underneath. And I'm looking nice and flat there. Very good. Let's get a few laps in and see what you'll do. And the car runs nice and smooth. I can hear a little bit of biting with the edges of the silicone tires. So let's remedy that situation real quick. So with the sharp edges on the silicone tires, what I'm going to do to eliminate that biting is I'll go ahead and take some 220 drywall sandpaper, and I'm just going to knock that edge off the inside and outside of the tires. I'll run that at low voltage, and I'm just going to just touch that on there just a little bit, just to knock that sharp edge off. And that ought to do it. Now I'm going to go ahead and just take my lint roller and knock off any dust or anything that I picked up. and we'll put the car back on the track and give it a couple of laps and see what it sounds like. And that sounds a lot better. Tires are not biting. Nice smooth acceleration. Now I can see, having raced these slotted classic type cars in the past, that I'm going to need just a little bit of weight. So I'm going to show you where I add that. So what I want to do is I'm going to want to put a little piece of sheet lead right here in the front and cover up this little square right here. That's a good starting point. And I'll be using the Professor Motor .016 sheet lead. And you can cut that with a pair of scissors very easily. So we'll just cut a square. And here's our little piece of lead. And we're going to fit that right in that square right there. Now, I haven't taken out any of the little ribs or anything there that were in the magnet holders. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just interested in trying to get this car as close as I think that I need it to be. Just going to press that in there. And let's take it back to the track and see if that works any better. Okay, let's get a few more laps in with it. And now we're going to push on the car just a little bit more, get some more acceleration, and see how it goes in and out of the turns. If it's nice and smooth. And I think we have just about the right amount of weight. The car seems to handle just right. It's snapping back out of the turns. So we'll go ahead and just back these pod screws out. Just maybe a quarter turn. We got real nice float there. It's not too much. Try to get them as even as possible. Looks like this one has just a little bit too much, so we'll go back in with that quarter turn and see. That looks pretty good. Just a hair more. Okay, that looks good. But one thing you can look at here is to make sure that we have our float. Is we have nice clearance all the way around the pod, all the way around, giving us nice float. Let's go ahead and put the body back on. And we're going to use the same screws as we used in the pod, the brass with the shoulders. And you don't want to over tighten these. I take them down until I feel they're about snug, back off about a half a turn. I don't want a lot of play there, just a tiny bit. just till I feel it going snug, and back off about a half a turn. Just want a little tiny bit of body float. And it looks like we have good clearance all the way around the chassis to the body. We have a little gap there all the way around the sides, across the front, and that's good. We don't have to do any chassis trimming. Okay, the body fits on real nice. We have just a tiny little bit of play in our front axle, not much. The back is still just a tiny bit. We have nice clearance between our rear tire and our wheel well. I like to check with just the end of a flathead screwdriver, and I have enough. And I like to make sure that we're free spinning. Put a little bit of pressure on it and it's not catching anywhere. Fronts are nice. Same thing, just a tiny little bit of pressure. Working real nice. Okay, we can finish this up now by installing the inserts. And by trying to press one in, I noticed that they were very, very tight. So what I'll do is I'm going to go around this outside edge, not the face, just the top edge, and I'm going to take that off. There's a little bit of paint on there. So I'm going to take that paint off of there and see how she fits. Also, on the back of the insert, I filed that down as well, so it would fit in there without hitting on the hub, because there's a big flat surface on the hubs of these CB design wheels. Let's press fit and see how it goes. It's a perfect fit. They press in real nice and easy. Oh yeah, those are real nice. That's good looking. Perfect fit. Perfect. Let's do the backs. They go in nice and even. They look good. Now the fit is good, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pop one out. I'm going to take just a small little dab of CA glue. One little dab on this side and one little dab on this side, and I'm going to press that in. Okay, so here's our finished product. And this car is ready to race. Now our car is done. Very good looking car. Let's go ahead and get a few laps in on it. See how she shakes down. Very nice indeed. What a beautiful car. So that about does it for our tuning on the Policar330P. This is a very nice car. I think it's going to be very competitive in our Slotix Classics class that we race here. And I'd like to thank Cloverleaf Racing, Slot Car Corner, and Home Racing World. Keep it in the slot.